Everyone good? Excellent, excellent. So before we start, hands up here who has experience with an EPM or PPM tool? Oh, about half, good. How many of you are EPM or PPM implementers? A few, okay. And who here doesn't know what EPM or PPM stands for? Anyone? One. So EPM, Enterprise Project Management, PPM, Portfolio Project Management. They're kind of interchangeable terms. Effectively, they're used to describe a tool set that we use to manage project, program, portfolio, information and data across normally a large organisation. So the presentation I've got for you this afternoon is specifically focused on resource management considerations when we're looking at an EPM tool. It's quite a specific niche area. There's a whole lot of other functional and conceptual components to EPM tools in general, but I'm really focusing on the resource management section, primarily because it's what I've been heavily involved with over the last 2 years and a couple of clients we've been working on. We're really a high emphasis on the resource management section of the PPM toolset. And this presentation is really tool agnostic. I'm not here to sell you on any particular tool, one or the other. There's a whole variety of different tools, some more complex, some less, some cloud-based, some server-based. It's really just more the general concepts and particularly pitfalls and things you can avoid, or hopefully try to avoid, when you are looking to implement a PPM toolset with a resource management flavour. So, key points I've got there, I guess, talking about what some of the key pitfalls are, understanding what happens if you have a tool-centric approach as opposed to a process-centric approach, and what the right kind of balance is in terms of actually getting the tool configured, designed and implemented in such a way that it really meets the needs of the clients you're working with. And also part of the presentation will be defining some of the key roles involved and some of the kind of standard reactions in the way they might see or view the implementation of a PPM tool, really to understand what those roles are and how they might potentially behave when you're talking about it. So I'm kind of coming at this from an implementing perspective, but there's a lot of key learnings I think we can get out of, depending on where you're coming from. If you're a governance sort of person, area person who's more interested in the data that's coming out of the tool, or if you're an actual user, or you're a resource manager or a project manager, the whole approach really needs to be consolidated and applied so that all those different areas will really get the maximum benefit out of the toolset. So, why is resource management using the PPM toolset important? Well, resource management in general is obviously a really important part of project and program management. The tool allows us to effectively quantify and show standardised data and give the right messages, the right information about where we are across our enterprise in terms of resource management. So some specific areas that it can help us, and that term quantification I guess is really the key term we need to use it, because we know there are going to be resource issues with any project or program, potentially. Quantification, be able to give clear and accurate data about where those constraints are, where the problems are, what future force planning we need to do, where our shortfalls are. That is one of the key elements of the resource management component of a tool like this. Other key areas, it helps us to quantify perhaps and understand the split between project management effort for our resources and BAU effort as well. So looking at what that mix is and understanding where as a business or as an organisation we really need to focus our time and effort and how we can forecast that time. So, first slide here on some of the roles involved with implementing a PPM tool. And the first key one is the implementer. I've listed a couple of key characteristics, and I like to think I've sort of kind of fit myself fit into some of these categories. Now, I've got a series of pictures that sort of visually describe what these different key roles look like. I've seen a number of presentations over the last couple of days where they're kind of airbrushed models. So I've decided to go for a slightly different tack on the pictures we're using here to describe these people. So effectively, that's my view of what a good key implementer should look like. And I think that picture captures the whole naivety and obliviousness of the culture of the organisation they're going into as well. Quite a happy sort of, naive kind of character. They need to be a good communicator. So they need to be able to go to the various stakeholders, understand what the different requirements are, gather those, put those together, and eventually come up with a tool or an implementation that is effective for what the business is really after. And capable of effective analysis and solution design. It took me quite a while to find a contemplative picture of Kermit. I think that one fits the bill quite nicely. All right. So, in the last couple of years, I've been involved with a couple of different organisations. I think the key issue that we've discovered or come across in terms of things that have held back the implementation of resource management is a preponderance on the tool side of the equation. And a couple of key points here. Quite often, a tool is regarded as a silver bullet that will resolve all of our organisation's resource management problems. And that is absolutely not the case. No tool, no matter how good or how rudimentary it is, will ever do that. And that is the issue, or quite the main issue that will often come up when you focus on an implementation primarily from a tool-centric approach. So the other side of that, of course, is the process side, which we'll talk about shortly. But what are some of the key questions we need to consider about the tool itself? So how easy is the tool to use? And I'm not just talking about from the people who are interpreting the data or making use of the outputs. I'm talking about the people who actually need to enter the data and use it at the coalface. Some of the issues we've encountered with our recent engagements have been different tool sets that we've come across. They might be very good and very specific, very easy to use in some areas. In other areas, they might be a bit more clunky perhaps. And that is often a really big turn-off for the people. We need to use, be ensuring that they're using the tool accurately and effectively. I guess the adage I sort of think of here is garbage in, garbage out. If we can't get the right people putting the right data at the right time into the tool set, the aggregated data, the reporting information we get out of it at the other end is just going to be of no use, and the tool won't do what it's been designed or implemented to do. A couple of other key specific areas. What functionality is there in the tool set for resource approval and confirmation? Now, this is an interesting feature. Obviously, there's quite often a sort of a conceptual process around this with an organisation, but how does a tool set actually allow you to do that? How does it build in with that process of your project managers conversing with your resource managers to determine which resources are available, where they need to fit into different projects? So having a tool that allows you to capture that progress in a robust, or that process in a robust way, but without creating too much of an overhead, I think is a key thing to consider when you're looking at a particular tool set. And a couple of other points there. Down the bottom there, I'm really going to focus on a huge amount, but a key consideration is, do we need to integrate our PPM tool with any other kind of software, finance, HR, etc.? What is the pathway for that? How easy or hard is it to do? But a really key thing there from the tool perspective is understanding how it will work, but also what we want it to do. So if we focus from the tool side specifically, we can get a lot of that stuff established, but we don't really understand how it's going to work from a process perspective. And that is a key failing that a lot of implementations have. And I think the key reason a lot of tool implementations don't really work and don't deliver what the client is after. Right, so before we talk about the process side of things, another key player in the implementation of a tool is PMO. So some of the key points I've got here, they should really be engaged very early in the requirements of the design piece of building up what the tool set's going to look like, how it's going to be implemented. And that last bullet point is really a key one. You need advocates for the tool within the organisation that will really help and drive the use, the embedding, the implementation, the buy-in to the tool. And I think a PMO is a key vehicle for that engagement, for that, not enforcement is probably the wrong word, but sometimes it has to be an enforcement. So the organisation we'll be dealing with primarily for the last year has about 12 PMOs. So as you can understand, it's quite a broad spectrum of different groups who've got to engage, and some of them engage at different levels, but they need to be engaged right throughout the process, I think, to allow success for an implementation of this kind. So I've tried to come up with a picture of a fairly typical PMO here. I think a few of those resemble some of the people on the dance floor at the party last night. All right, next key point. From the other side, the process considerations. So, and this is really where in the engagement we've been working on recently, a lot of the stuff wasn't really done or wasn't done up front at the right time. So key things to think about here. How do our resource and project management processes actually work? What is the physical or the current conceptual and sort of standard ways that people interact with each other to get resources, to procure them, to ensure they're working on their project? How do we negotiate and liaise between project managers and resource managers or team leads as to how we're going to get people in there? So who requests and who provides? What is the specific understanding? What are the connections that currently operate within our organisation? How does resourcing impact on program or project prioritisation? Now, a couple of the other presentations over the last couple of days have been about project prioritisation and choosing to do the right projects and the right programs at the right times. Resource management and resource forecasting is a really important constraint we want to apply in that. So if we're using that overall project prioritisation strategic determination model or system, the resource management side is really important there. And primarily what we need to ensure is that the quality of the resource forecasting data we're using for those determinations is good. Okay. Now, another key player in the project and the resource management area, obviously from the demand point of view, we have project managers who want to get the resources in place on their projects to be able to deliver what they're trying to output. And some characteristics we've observed of project managers over the last few while, so we've got a few sort of things put in there. Quite often you get a lot of cynicism, and I apologise to any project managers in the audience, but a lot of them will just think, oh, it's another tool, this isn't really going to do what I'm after, it's not going to work that well. So, and those project managers tend to fall along the continuum. We do have enthusiastic project managers. So for a chocolate bar, can anyone name that Muppet? Scooter? Who said Scooter? You catch?
Yeah.
Nice, well done. From the indifference point of view, 2 chocolate bars, if anyone can name this project manager. I had to Google this one. If you wait till the end, I'll tell you who it is. Third one, the freaked out project manager. Doesn't want a bar of anything to do with the tool. They're just, they're quite nervous, they don't really like it, they don't like what it's going to do. And the final one we've got is the totally anti-project manager, who absolutely won't have a bar of anything, is obstructive in requirements gathering meetings. Some of the sort of different characters you quite often got to deal with. Okay. So, what I've spent a lot of time thinking over the last couple of years is how we reconcile these two elements. How do we reconcile the tool-centric approach with the process approach? And we've certainly found that the implementation we've been dealing with, it really has been more of a tool-centric approach. But what I've kind of come up with under the process of testing this out is doing things, and I guess in some ways this has some synergies with the agile approach, in a couple of passes. Now, we don't necessarily have to do the tools, requirements and the straw man sort of determination in that first pass. We could swap the order around, but they need to be run side by side with each other rather than proceeding down the path of tool requirements gathering without any focus on process and vice versa. So something we're trying to do in our team is establish requirements from one direction or the other, build up a straw man, and then re-examine that in reverse from the other perspective. So practically we're talking about, I want my tool to be configured to handle resource management in this way in terms of my generic resources, my scheduling, how do I account for resource costs, how do I account for capacity, lead, etc. And we build up a function or straw man of how those things might work in a particular tool. We then take that model and re-examine it through the lens of process. So how does the process within the organisation fit what we're currently doing or currently proposing? Is it a close match or isn't it? And one thing we've found, we're just starting to do this, is that the realisation we often get out of that is that the processes that we're trying to capture within the tool aren't as robust or as fully fledged or fully formed as they should be. So this in itself is quite a useful exercise to try and figure out, well, are we actually doing things process-wise the right way before we even think about implementing a tool to actually capture capture the data and record it, report it, etc. So essentially, once we've worked through those different passes, the output should be, we should be able to come together with a consistent approach in terms of implementation that covers both the process side and the tool side, and hopefully will give our clients, the project managers, the resource managers, the organisation, a much better and more robust way of tracking resource management information within the tool. Resource managers. Any resource managers in the room? A couple? Okay, I apologise in advance for the pictures I've used for you guys. Please forgive me. So resource managers often feel swamped with the demands they've got. They're often very protective of their team and people, which is great. However, that can at times be obstructive in terms of providing them to the right people. I'm talking in real generalities here. There's people all across the spectrum who operate in different ways, but this is just some examples that we've observed specifically in our recent engagements. Like PMs, and that third bullet point is a key one, they'll only get on board to using a tool and really buy into it if they see a direct, tangible benefit for them and their team. And that is the biggest thing we've had to combat in our recent engagements. How does this help me? What is it going to do for me? And if you can't provide a tool set that gives them some daily benefit, then you kind of, I have a few cruder ways of saying this, but you're going to struggle to effectively implement and get by and get a good use of the tool. So these people can be a tough nut to crack, and they can vary wildly in enthusiasm. Names of these guys? Waldorf and Statler, well done. Fancy a chocolate? Alright, let's see how accurate I am. Good catch. Okay, and in terms of the last bullet point, they can vary wildly in enthusiasm, and that's interchangeable as well. Okay, so the thumbs up and the thumbs down can vary even within a single meeting. So I've seen that happen. They can go from being wildly enthusiastic about it, and then thinking about what they find out about it, then becomes, okay, this isn't really for us. All right, next. So what can happen, and I'll actually just let you read through those bullet points for a couple of seconds here. What can happen in the top instance if the implementation is too tool focused, and then what happens if it's too process focused. As you read about, just draw your attention to the third bullet point, and it's something we're encountering specifically in our work we're doing at the moment. Because the tool was initially implemented sort of in a one-size-fits-all with that kind of approach, we're now finding we're having to do significant rework in what was originally implemented to try and match the different elements and different PMOs that need to actually use it. So you can't be all things to everybody. You need to have a layer of consistency, but also enough flexibility to provide people within different areas who use the tool quite differently to be able to do what they need to do. Right, HR. So HR audit, I've found in our recent work, HR is often a forgotten part of this equation. How do HR actually work? How do they need to use resource information data? What can they provide? And the organisation that we're dealing with, HR really does the future planning for the people that is required for certain projects. So we operate an organisation where we've got very long lead times for projects, and the time it takes to get people skilled up is often measured in years, often months and multiple years. So we really have we've had to develop a resource management system that allows us to track 10, 15 years out into the future, which is a lot longer than most projects, to then try and figure out from an HR perspective, what do we need to be doing now to start fulfilling the right resource needs for 5, 10 years into the future. So from that point of view in our organisation, the tool that comes out of the resource management component of an EPM tool, the data that comes out of that tool is really vital. We often find that these people, certainly in this organisation, can be disconnected from the RMs and PMs. So there's not a lot of synergy between the two in terms of PMs not going to RMs saying, well, I need specific people, but then that information doesn't get from the RMs through to HR, and they don't really have a clear picture, a clear way of assessing what kind of skills, etc. we're going to build over the next X number of years. Now, I have to apologise to HR people again. I googled Muppets HR, and this is a picture I got. So, yeah, apologies if you're from an HR persuasion. So, considering our tool side and our process side, how does that then implement, and what do we need to consider in terms of requirements gathering and design? And when we're talking about requirements gathering and design, I'm talking about both tool and process, not just one or the other. Key thing we've found is that we need to engage with the right spectrum of people. The previous slide I pointed out, or the two slides ago I pointed out, the redesign, the rework that had to be done because perhaps the implementation initially was one size fits all. A big part of that is that initially a big enough cross-section or the right cross-section of people were not engaged with to determine what the tool needs to be able to do and how it needs to be configured. So what I've tried to capture there is a spectrum all the way from the people using the tool, the resource managers, the project managers using it from a day-to-day basis, even down to the resources themselves, who might be using things like timesheeting within the tool, all the way up to the people who are consuming the data at the end of the day, the governance, various different governance layers, directors, etc. We want to be able to see aggregations of that resource management information. And that final key bullet point is another thing we've often found really important, is you can gather your requirements, you can sit away, talk about it in workshops, build a tool over a period of weeks or months, present it to the client effectively, and they go, this kind of wasn't really what I was expecting. And that's a key thing that's come through a lot of the presentations around Agile over the last couple of days. So from this point of view, we've found it really beneficial to have short, sharp sprints of development or configuration of the tool, take it back to the key stakeholders, show them how it's working, give them a chance to play in it to ensure that what they're getting is actually going to serve their purpose, both from a functional point of view and from a process point of view as well. Common sense, but we've found that that's really been stark relief over this engagement we've worked on recently. Governance and executive, and this, again, I'm being very broad and painting this in very broad strokes. This can be across a very wide spectrum, all the way up to sort of very senior executives, to heads of departments, to portfolio managers. I've kind of used a very broad construct here. Key thing we've found with them, I guess this is probably the case for all organisations and all different types of software, they don't really understand what is required to actually successfully implement a tool. So the whole silver bullet concept, yep, we'll get these experts, they'll come in, they'll put the tool in, it'll all be hunky-dory, well, that never pans out. And I think that is often because of the next two bullet points. They need to be engaged and drive the use of the tool within the organisation. And specifically, as they are quite often, hopefully going to be the ultimate recipients of that broad resource forecasting data to make good strategic decisions about what projects can be undertaken, they need to be seen to be making good use of it. Why is that important? Why do any of us care if someone 3 or 4 levels up the chain is using the data that we're putting in? Any ideas?
If you're not using it, why are you gathering it?
Sorry, could you say that again?
If you're not using it, why are you gathering it?
Exactly. Probably 50% of the project managers that we deal with on a daily and weekly basis in the organisation say exactly the same thing. I'm putting all the stuff in, spending half an hour a day, where's it going? What's it being used for? Okay. Standard governance, executive level picture, Sam the Eagle, everything's far too silly. I like that picture. And another big part, I guess the final sort of key area in terms of consideration, which ties in really with the process and tool side, is the cultural change. Quite often, organisations who have not used an EPM or PPM tool before, they don't really understand the rigour involved or the importance of having a consistent way of gathering information and ensuring that information is gathered consistently so it can therefore be aggregated accurately and provide the forecast capacity utilisation pictures we're after. So, some of the key impediments, and these comments, most of them, a couple I've kind of embellished slightly, but these are actual comments we have from people. My favourite one is, everyone is a snowflake. Oh, this can't work for me, I do things uniquely. Oh, so you manage people to do tasks. Yeah. Hasn't that been done since time immemorial by people who built the pyramids? Yeah, but my people are different, and I'm completely different. Now, the way I do this, the way I think about it, my head is completely different. So that's quite an entrenched attitude we encounter with one resource manager. We have to try and work around. I've got it all in my head. Project managers prefer to shoulder tap. They don't want to be constrained to a particular system to go in and say, right, I need to request this and work through this process to get the people I'm after. I just want to go and grab the people I'm after. Might work for them, but does it work for the wider organisation and the ability to deliver these projects? So, how do we move past these impediments? And I guess the key thing here, we'll often get buy-in from our governance level, from our executive. That buy-in is often just an initial tick in the box. Yep, I approve this, it's going to be great, go ahead and do it. As we pointed out in the last slide, that buy-in needs to be over a period of time and needs to become entrenched as actually definable and demonstratable behaviour in terms of what the people in the governance level, the people using the data, actually do with it. They make concrete, good decisions based on the information they're getting. And I guess one of the key selling points that you'll need to try and convey to the people doing the data entry, the project managers, the resource managers, etc., is what benefit is there for me? I guess with PPM tools in general, the immediate benefit is automated project status reports. That's probably our biggest selling point when we go to people that we can go to them and say, rather than spending an hour to cobble together your fortnightly status report, as long as you've got the data in the system, we can get you to do it with a couple of clicks. So that's a really good selling point, but often that's not enough to sell them on the tool. So how do we actually get resource managers and project managers enthused about spending the time to put their data into the tool without it becoming an overhead, so they get some tangible benefit? And it comes down to the cycle. Now this is really common sense. I think there's nothing sort of rocket sciencey about this. Effectively, if we start in the bottom left-hand corner, our project managers and our resource managers do our ongoing data entry. That often will then come to the PMO for reporting and analysis to aggregate the data, provide it to the right level of the governance layer. And this is a key thing that often is missing, certainly in our experience. Steps then need to be taken to rectify the resourcing issues that our data is displaying. And that can be as simple as practical as ensuring the right resources are delivered to the right projects at the right time. That's a very glib way of saying that, but that is the end goal we're trying to work towards when we implement any kind of tool that does this. Filling the circle, potentially HR, might be someone else within the organisation, provides the resources, and then I tried to find a positive picture of Beacon. It's the best one I could find. And as you can see, Waterford and Sattler are slightly happier than they are in that one, but it's not a huge difference. But if we can, through the use of the tool and through the entry of that data, working through that process, then provide our resource managers and project managers with a better outcome, then that is our selling point to get them to use the tool. It needs to be tangible, it needs to be quantifiable, and they need to be able to see a direct benefit. And to be bluntly honest, that's where we find with a lot of the implementations that don't work, that is what doesn't happen. Okay. So, final couple of slides. My background is actually in training. Originally, I used to be a primary school teacher, and I've been in training for about 25 years. However, actually not quite 25, they'll make me a bit older than I am, about 20. What does good training look like? And there's really a combination of different things there. We need to ensure, and hopefully this will come out of the implementation process we talked about already, that there is a good mix of functional training and process training. If you deliver training to a bunch of project managers and resource managers, and it's all about, I click here, I click there, I do that to do a link, I do that to schedule my project, I do that to update progress. Cool, that's good. They go away equipped with that knowledge, but they don't go away equipped with the understanding of how the business wants them to use that tool. What is the reporting rhythm? What is the level of granularity in the schedule? How do they request a generic resource as opposed to a named individual? And that's why the process side and the functional side need to be integrated as a whole when you're implementing a tool like this to provide, I think, the best possible outcome. And just the rest of the points are sort of pretty standard. If you've done training before, if you have a training background, most of the stuff is applicable for any kind of training, not just obviously training in this particular area. One thing that we've found that's particularly useful, particularly useful. Oh, sorry, wrong one here. That one. Backing up. So post-training support. We often try, in our organisation, we try to provide multiple sessions of training, not day-long sessions that people sort of leave wondering, what the hell have I just found out about, and remember about 10% of it. We provide short, sharp sessions initially. We then try to ensure we have follow-up sessions where we can take those people, perhaps in a one-on-one or one-on-two, through how to use the system in their own way and in ways that relate to them in terms of their projects. And having that backup, whether it's provided by the implementer, by change champions or champions within the PMO or trainers, doesn't matter who it is, it's a really vital support part of any kind of engagement. And what does successful implementation look like? So, a couple of key points. I'll really just talk about the first two bullet points there. PMs have a consistent and easy method of scheduling. They have a tool that they can use easily, that's flexible, that they can change and track progress, and that they can easily make requests for resources within their system at the defined level of granularity, templates, etc. Resource managers then have a flexible way and a usable way of confirming, in conjunction with the project managers, which resources are required, formalising the provision of those resources, and then being able to track what the resources are actually doing and how they're going from a tracking perspective. If anyone's interested, I'll have the slide deck available. I can email it to you at the end if anyone's interested in a bit more information on this. Right, final destination. So essentially when we're doing an implementation, again a very broad brush slide, but there are two options we've got. We end up with a happy combination of the various different players in the organisation, which then leads to a happy implementer. Now for me, disco, I really like disco, so disco equates to happiness with me, which is why I've chosen that picture of Kermit. On the other side, we then have a selection of different Muppets in different states of disarray and disquiet, particularly like that last one there. I think it really captures what a stress project manager or resource manager looks like, and that ends up with the implementation person looking like that. Okay, any questions? Nothing? Do you want to know the name of that Muppet? Link Hog Throb is his name. There you go. If you've learned one thing, take one thing away from you, it's that for the session today. Okay. Thanks very much for your time. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.